The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Mid-Carolina Service Company.
Mid-Carolina Service Company is the first name to search for your residential or commercial HVAC needs in Lexington and surrounding areas.
Just go holler at Jason and Clint. They'll hook you up on the air conditioners, on the restaurant equipment, refrigerators, refrigeration, ice machine repair. They've been doing this for years. I know them cats forever.
Family owned and operated since 2006, they pride themselves in their quality work and customer relationships. Call 803-356-4153 or visit midcarolinaserviceco.com for a no obligation quote for service today.
The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by True Brilliance Entertainment.
True Brilliance is a production, promotions, and management company dedicated to connecting artists and producers across the Carolinas to music industry professionals.
Several of their clients have placements both domestic and internationally as a result of their services.
Are you an artist or producer looking to build meaningful relationships within the music industry? Then True Brilliance is for you. Check them out at paramilitary.com. That's spelled P-A-I-R-A military.com.
This episode of the Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Bob's. Bob's is a Columbia-based retailer of over 100 Black-owned products from 20 Black-owned businesses. Bob's offers a wide range of items from household cleaning, cosmetics, and everything in between. With every visit to Bob's, you support Black-owned businesses, giving them the opportunity to grow and establish connections with our community. Bob's is located inside the Noma warehouse at 2222 Sumter Street in Columbia, South Carolina. Visit their website, weshopbobs.com for in-store pickup or to find out more. Bob's can also be found via social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at weshopbobs. When you stop by, tell them the Hilltop Glove sent you. Bob's brings quality Black brands to the Columbia community. The Hilltop Glove Podcast is sponsored by Red Rooster Sports Bar and Grill. Red Rooster is your neighborhood bar and grill serving the best wings, burgers, and baskets in the Met.
Like the amazing food, the bar is always on tap, and there's plenty of screens to watch the big game. Red Rooster is the Midland's premier meetup spot for local car and bike clubs, fraternities, and sororities.
Staff is dedicated to accommodating all kinds of parties and events. If you're looking to catch a game, have a bite, and a drink, look no further than the Red Rooster.
Red Rooster is located at 7500 Wilson Boulevard, Columbia, South Carolina. For more information, visit redroostersportsbar.com or visit them on Facebook, Instagram at Red Rooster Sports Bar. Go where the winners go.
Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast.
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 Welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast, where Skip and DJ and What interview guests and discuss topics such as business, current events, and pop culture. The motivational podcast for the hip-hop millennial. Good morning, and welcome to the Hilltop Glove Podcast. Being woke in Adulting is a challenge. If you're into hip hop or motivational talk, this is definitely the podcast for you. I'm one of your hosts today, DJ and What, and I'm going to be joined by Tamaya today. How you doing today, Tamaya?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm feeling great this morning. I know we're going to have an excellent conversation for our listeners today. We have a fantastic guest, Preach Jacobs. He is a DJ, an MC, a journalist and columnist, a podcaster, and an overall influencer in arts and culture here in Columbia, South Carolina. He has been a powerful ambassador of hip hop and culture here in the capital through events like ColaCon and Mo Better Soul. And he has continued that work through the pandemic in creative and inventive ways. Good morning, Preach. How you doing today, brother man?
I'm good. You're going to give these listeners like too high of expectations of this conversation.
Man, hey, Preach, I hold you up in such high regard, man. I had to put you in the proper level for the folks so that when they come through and they see, yeah, man. Like they said, we got to give people their flowers while they're here. So, man, I just want to let you know how much we appreciate you, man.
Look, man, when I get my
whole lot that happens in Columbia that you ain't got something to do with. Anyway.
That's my point. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate that. Look, man. You know, when I get my NAACP Image Award, I want you to present it just like that.
Yes, sir. No, seriously. I'm for real. Give me a call. Be like, hey, I want him to introduce me. They be like, who's this guy? No, just let him introduce me.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
Excellent. I just wanted to welcome you to our show today, man. Let you know how much we appreciate having you here today. Of course, we have conversations with a myriad of people from different fields, experiences in life, professional avenues, and et cetera. And your hand on the pulse and finger on the pulse here in Columbia is one of the things that it made me extremely excited about this interview. And I know coming from Charleston, being first actually meeting you and seeing what you do and how you make things happen here. I remember Kevin just talking so much good stuff about you. I was like, yo, I got to meet this guy named Preach. I got to see what he does, what's going on. Because he went to so many of the different events, how you set up events, how you pull together different classes and groups of people to make sure that they have a good time. There's some power in that. And I always like seeing that positive vibe and that being influenced on people, wherever, whatever walk of life they come through. But first things first, as we do with all our guests, I must ask, man, and for you, it's going to be a little different, but I just want you to give our listeners some background on how you became Preach and your journey to where you are right now in the cultural aspects of Columbia and all the movings and goings about.
It's weird, man, because it's like I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm not saying that to say like people be like I've been doing this for years, but it's like my first show that I ever did, I was like 14 years old. Wow. And I'm touring and doing shows and putting stuff together. And so when I tell people I've been doing, this shit for like 20 years, it's this no joke. It's no hyperbole. Like it's straight up over 20 years. Now, have I been doing it well for 20 years? A whole different conversation. Because and I say that lovingly, right? Like I give you an example. Like I was doing a film series called Super Soul Cinema. And we were focusing on blaxploitation movies where I'll put my turntables out and play like 70s music. And we'll show like all of these really, really crappy blaxploitation movies. And I'm gonna tell you, they weren't good, but they were endearing because if you think about it from the perspective of Black people in Hollywood, you didn't have Black directors, Black producers, Black boom mic holders. So when the movies are really fucking bad, like if you watch The Mac, there's literally a scene where there's a boom mic in the shot. You know what I'm saying?
Lord,
and I can imagine they were looking through the footage and they was like, fuck it, keep it. Because we don't have the money. We don't have the money to go back. We can't afford to put this, to record this again. Fuck that. All these costumes and people and these extras, man, we ain't doing that. But
film costs money back then too. Film costs money.
Exactly. And the way I feel about it is, that was us seeing us figure this shit out. You know what I'm saying? So even if the movies were bad, I love the endearing effect of like, yo, we want to tell our own stories for the first time. And so if that means that we don't know how to direct and we figure this out on the fly, fuck it. That's why I love the movies, no matter how bad they are. Hip hop for me, and hip hop specifically in Columbia, is the same way. Like the amount of times we're doing shows and events, not knowing how to make our flyers, not knowing how to do, we had to learn early on before we could like have our music on laptops or Serato that instead of like rapping over CDs, you got to use mini discs because CDs will skip. I mean, there's so much stuff that we just learned kind of on some trial and error tip. You know what I'm saying? And we're still figuring it out. You know what I mean? So, it's been a while, but the Preach name, I would say two things. I was just a dork in school and I used to be obsessed with Black history and, kids are mean, they try to be funny, but it stuck because it was like, the teacher was talking about Black history. She'll say something about Black history and she'll look at me and she'll be like, is that okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm like, you may proceed. You know?
Oh my goodness, yo. He's the gatekeeper.
And they're like, oh, preach to him, you know. They was like, okay, you know, but then there's also Cooley High, which is like my favorite movie of all time growing up. So like it just eventually just became a thing. So I remember as early as like 12 or 13, the name just kind of sticking with me. You know what I mean? So that was pretty much it. And I adopted it because I really felt like, especially being a creative here and a writer here, when we talk about like hip hop culture, when I put Colacon together with hip hop and comics, the synergy made so much sense because rappers are just like superhero stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
those are superheroes.
Yeah. When I saw Ghostface, I'm not calling him his government name. He's Ghostface. And,
exactly.
You know, and sometimes you have to have that separation. You know what I mean? Like
Clark Kent and Superman.
I mean, yeah. I mean, and so like when my family calls me the government, like I know that I'm in a safe place with them. Whereas an artist out here, you give so much, and a lot of it, you give up a lot of your privacy. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of the deal that you make when you're like, all right, well, I want to be involved in the community. I want to be involved, whether it's music, whether it's political, whether it's column writing, and you're being a voice for a community out here. You know, you offer up some of your privacy. And so like the times that I can keep hold of a little bit that I have, I'll fight for it. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is me.
Okay. That's a good way to express it. That's good. And that's like you say, man, preach, bro, preach.
That's like ego.
Plus, it's funny because, like, you know, people used to buy my stuff thinking I was a gospel rapper. And I'm like, nah, no.
Seriously?
I'm talking.
Sorely.
I'm talking a bunch of stuff, man. I had a song where I shouted out Jada Fire. What up, Jada Fire? You know what I'm saying? So, like,
I listened to that podcast, too. I listened to that episode. I'm on episode 25 now.
Well, listen, you said episode singular. Keep listening to the podcast. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah, preach. I really enjoy your podcast, though. So you're going to have to get all of us on it soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know. Let me know. Pull up.
Okay. So one of the issues we look at in the podcast is the role of the citizen journalist, people speaking about their community, as opposed to sensationalizing, polarizing theater that we get from traditional media or just plain fake news on the internet. You're a local writer. You are published regularly. Recently, you wrote a story about the incident at 701 Whaley Center of Contemporary Arts in Columbia, South Carolina, where an artist in residence was approached by the police, basically for working on his exhibit, Wild Black. So can you give us a quick recap for the listeners about that incident?
Well, from what I know, and there's a lot of like moving parts with that. And also, full disclosure, I'm a board member of 701 CCA, so it might get a little touchy. But from what I know and what I talked about, the way that I talked about the column, I brought that issue up, and it was more or less about Black interaction, brown interaction with law enforcement. So it's still something where I think literally the day that story came out, it was like the 1 year anniversary of the George Floyd murder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And so I said to myself, I was just like, you know, when that happened last year, when George Floyd murder happened last year, Columbia exploded. I was in an emotional state. And I asked myself, I was like, a year later, do we feel better about our relationship? You know what I'm saying? It's like
good question.
It's like if a married couple go through a huge fight and they argue and they have this big blow up. At some point, you're like, you know what? Maybe I feel better. I'm glad we've been through this. You know what I mean? Like we don't have that relationship here with law enforcement. It's just like, I think with Black culture, we're just kind of designed and built to just get over things, but not work our way through it. And the only way that can happen, because you have to have a willing party on the other side.
Repeat that part again.
There has to be a willing party on the other side to make those things right, and that doesn't happen. And that's why stories like what happened to Mr. Sims at 701 happened. It was a situation where, you know, cops pull up and they handcuff him while he's an artist in resident. And it's like, no, his show is here. His artwork is here. The cops were basically like, they were like, oh, we didn't know people lived here. Like, that's impossible.
Right.
Yes.
You know, that's impossible.
Totally impossible. I've known that for the past 5 to 7 years.
I mean, how many residents have stayed there?
I haven't lived here before.
Yeah. And so it puts a lot of pressure on us because all of a sudden now that became a national story.
Wow.
And instead of Columbia getting credit for being able to house such an amazing art show, because the art show is worldly, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of us getting the credit for being able to have that show here, we're having those discussions on a national level about good old South Carolina again. You know what I mean? Wow. And so I talked about in an article, the South Carolina dealings with that, because we have that issue there. We have the incident that happened in 2015 in Charleston. When an officer shot a black man and threw the taser on him, and you had a young black man film it and exposed it. And so the conversation was more or less like, do we feel better? Like I remember, and I talked about this in the story. This happened to me maybe Christmas 2016, Christmas 2017. I can't remember, but it's literally Christmas morning, like 2 a.m. I'm starving. And the only place open at the time was like a McDonald's, like in West Columbia. So I go to McDonald's, I'm driving back home. And while I'm driving back home, I'm on like Gervais, and I see a woman on the ground, like laid out. And I'm like, I stopped my car immediately. I'm like, did she get shot? Did she have a heart attack? I don't know. So I stopped my car and I dialed 911. And I'm like, yo, there's a woman laying down like on the side of the street. She's not moving. And I'm talking to the operator. She says, where are you? I tell her where I'm at. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, a part of me is afraid that maybe she got shot. Is the shooter still around? Yeah. But another part of me is like, what if I can get out and she's choking and I need to turn her to the side? You know what I mean? Like something that I can do to help. And so I say to the operator, I'm like, yo, I'm going to get out and I'm going to take a look. And she pauses because she could tell I was black and I could tell she was black and I could tell she was black. And she was like, yo. Nah, bad idea. Bad idea. Don't do that. And we spoke this shorthand, and she immediately was like, she was immediately like, yo, tell me what kind of car you driving so I can let the cops know what you're driving. And so it put me in this situation where I'm like, even when I want to help, I'm so terrified that I could be, mistook as the perpetrator.
Yeah, at any point.
Yo, that's some real shit. That's some real shit. And truthfully, the woman, she turned out to be okay. I'm glad that happened. What if the woman that passed away, and it was like, if somebody would have just, did this and ran up to her and did blah, 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 she could, I would have had to eat that. And I would have had to be like, well, I was afraid that, and that's real. And that's something that I think that when we talk about Black and brown involvement with law enforcement, it's not something that's this grandiose thing that happened in bigger cities. It's not something that happens, this is a New York problem. This is an LA problem. Like, no, we have that all around. And to this day, I haven't seen anything that makes me feel like I feel better. Like, it's not like I've been like, all right, I feel all right now. Like, I'm telling you, like PTSD, even look, you would think that I got birds in the car the way that I feel when a cop pull up behind me. You know what I'm saying? you would think that I'm
problems. Exactly.
I'm trying to tell you, like, yo, and I drive a Toyota Highlander. Like, I'm scared. Like, come on.
Oh, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you shouldn't even be looking like a quote unquote a perp. But that has to sit in the back of your mind.
I like how you just dissed my car too. He was like, I was about to tell you the year, but I'm not going to do that now, mister.
No, but you know what I mean? It's not like you're riding around in some random looking Maserati.
Yeah. But that also brings up another thing where a few years ago, Chris Rock had this like social experiment that he put on his Instagram where he basically started filming every time he would get pulled over.
Wow.
Right? Like, and it'd just be like, because he drives a nice fucking car because he's Chris Rock. True. And I remember corny ass Isaiah Washington, who used to be on Grey's Anatomy, the black actor, tried to blame Chris Rock. So, you know what? Chris Rock, you drive a nice car. I drive a Prius. That's why it don't happen to me. He's like, fuck you. Right? So like, why are we blaming?
Yeah.
Blaming the victim. Yeah.
From the victim's own group, which is, you see how that's another point that can be made on that fact that's even weirder about it. It's so insidious is that it has festered into our own community to the point where we don't even trust ourselves.
Right.
We will go ahead and put the blame on us. Say, hey, he must have been doing something bad. He must not have been where you're supposed to be at.
That's media, man. That's that global media force.
There's a term for that, right? Because I talked about this too a few times. There's something called respectability politics, and that happened with the George Floyd stuff that happened last year. Where if you think about the theory of respectability politics, the idea is basically anytime you look at the footage during the civil rights movement of us being attacked by dogs or sprayed with water hoses or beat by cops, you notice one thing specifically: Black people are well dressed.
Yes,
they're wearing their Sunday best, and that was by design. The theory was, if we look nice in our Sunday best and the world is beating up on us, these people are beating up on us, the world will look at this and say, why are you beating these people up? They're so dressed nicely. Like, why are you doing this? So, because we thought there would be a shame that would be attached to it. And so what ends up happening a lot of times, it trickles over. It's that, when George Floyd was murdered, there was these conversations, and I've had some of these conversations, people like, oh, well, what if he was wearing a suit? You know what I'm saying?
Oh my Lord.
I'm telling you, it's Andre say, as every nigga with gold for the fall, it's every nigga with dreads. I can't remember how he said the line, but basically saying like these appearances that we put on each other. Mm-hmm. We want to look at somebody and say, oh, well, this Black person had gold teeth in their mouth. They had tattoos. Like what? They don't deserve to live?
Right.
Yeah.
They have a hood on their head. Like what? You can't wear a hood?
Yeah, and we do that to each other more than anybody else. And so
that's one point. Exactly. Yeah, we're horrible with that.
And that's why, like, for the past year, not only because of COVID, but kind of as a form of protest, I just wore sweatpants everywhere. I said, fuck it. Because I'm like, when I was doing interviews and Zoom calls with news stations, I'm wearing a hoodie and sweats. My hair is going to be nappy because I need to have the opportunity for people to say, all right, he might be dressed in sweats, but does that take away from anything that he's saying? When we look at Steve Jobs, that dude had mom jeans and a turtleneck on. When you look at Mark Zuckerberg, he has a gray T-shirt and sweats everywhere, or jeans or whatever. Nobody ever says that the things they talk about is diminished because of what they're wearing. It only happens with us. So that's something that I want to fight against too. I definitely think that Black folks, and I'm not accusing Black folks of anything, because it sounds like these thoughts coming from people that look like my dad's generation. My dad, we watch the NBA game, got all them tattoos on. It's like, so what?
What does that matter? Yeah.
So it's something that happens with us as well. And it's not far from home. And those are things that we have to work on with ourselves too.
Yeah, it's like engraved in us because it comes so naturally.
Mm-hmm. I think part of that too, we're dealing with irrationality. So you're dealing with somebody like with an irrational group that is putting you in a position of danger. So like normally when you could just talk it out or explain what's going on or et cetera, just like the gentleman who's up there where he was supposed to be at, the police show up. The easiest thing you could have done is contact the folk who run the place. Say, hey, is this gentleman supposed to be here? Before you got into anything else, you make a call, you contact somebody, you connect the dots.
It goes a step further. If he was a white artist in resident, they wouldn't even have to make the call.
I know.
That makes me think about last week before we were trying to do this whole podcast. Remember Mike mentioned, what about if he called the police on himself?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me turn up the controversy on this.
Yeah,
turn it up a little bit.
Give it to the white guy to start the drama.
Look, I strongly believe that everybody needs a crazy ass white friend that don't give a fuck and won't say anything.
Well, don't worry. You're going to talk to the cops when they show up, but I'm standing in the back.
Mike, go talk to him.
He's my lead counsel.
So all right. So when I first heard that story, I was like, well, yep, fuck 12. Right? Because that's just where I come from. Because I've seen the cops do a whole lot of shady shit. Not saying there's not good cops out there. There are. I've met a few. But as a whole, my experience has been cops are bullies, and the policing training situation encourages that hyper masculine, dominate every situation, don't hear anybody's advice, don't hear what anybody got to say until they are completely submissive. It's an authoritarian thing. And that's un-American. That's a problem.
I think that's so American. That's what the problem is.
Well, yeah.
The history of policing is a different subject. That's another time. Yes,
it's a whole other podcast. I want to jump into that. It's a whole other podcast. But yes.
So your story comes out, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, And so then, this is right after I got my vaccine. So I'm going around, I'm seeing everybody I ain't seen in a year and all of this stuff. And you got to be talking about what's going on. So it came up several times. Yo, did you hear what happened at 701? And I guess probably at least 2 or 3 people, separate situations, but they were all white, were like, dang, I'm not saying he did this, but it would be smart. That would be good marketing if an artist called the cops on themselves, considering the kind of work that they're doing.
This dude is crazy. It's one of those things. He's world renowned. He don't need attention. And the funny thing about it is, those are things that happen with us all the time, where we're not allowed to be like victims, right? Like, for an example, I could take a small example. I was listening to Serena talking about how she almost died giving birth to her daughter. Mm-hmm. And one of the underlying things that came up with the conversation was she would talk to her doctors about how much fucking pain she would be in, not just through like the labor situation, but just on a regular basis of her being this professional athlete. And what would happen is she was misdiagnosed, or she wasn't taken as seriously as possible when she's talking about the level of pain. And one of those things that happened was we noticed statistically that more Black women die in childbirth in America. It's like a ridiculous number that's compared to, their counterparts. And what happens is, because when Black women say that they feel pain, or Black women say that they feel something that's not right with their bodies, they're trusted more than they're not trusted as much as other people, as if, somehow, some way you can handle pain better than anybody else or whatever. And so what happens is just a transition of our pain isn't respected, right? So yeah, you know what I mean? It always has to be something trickstery about it. You know what I mean? Always like, like, look at how the country treats LeBron. Like, he's sneaky. Yes, you know what I mean? But it's something that trickles down with everything. And especially like, we're talking about, and specifically it's funny when we talk about pro athletes, because all of a sudden the conversation changes with pro athletes where it's like, oh, you make a lot of money, shut up and dribble, or this and this and that. And it's like, I don't care how much LeBron makes. He's the labor force compared to the owner of the team. Yes. People don't think about it from that perspective. Yes. But what usually happens is we're not allowed to be victims. And more so than that, when we are victims, we have to be poised. We have to be like, anytime you see one of these Black men murdered by the cops or killed by the cops, the mothers, when they speak, they have to be the most civilized, most calm people ever. And
they must apologize.
I mean, look, don't get me started on that. Look, this shit ain't none of the questions y'all had ready to go. I'm sorry.
But for real, like that aspect though, I think is real important. That like there's a different narrative going on, and the fact that. A part of me thinks that it's like, like white people want to believe that there's something else going on, because if they just wake up one day and realize that like all of the people controlling all of our lives don't give a shit about any of us, then that's terrifying. So as long as you believe that the system's here for you, it's a little bit better.
Well, I think the conversation shifted a little bit. The conversation shifted a little bit last year, I think in a good way, because when we talk about law enforcement involvement with Black and brown people, we've been saying this shit for years. What you saw happen during the protests nationwide last year is that you saw law enforcement fuck everybody up, right? Like there was footage where there was literally a cop that pushed a 75-year-old white man on the ground, hit his head. Like, I saw the footage, hit his head, and blood started coming out of his ear. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, yo, and it's not one of those things where it's like, yo, I'm glad it's happening to other people. No, but what it is that we're like, it's like the monster movie when you tell niggas like, yo, there's a ghost in this motherfucking house. And they're like, nah. And as soon as Jason come out with a motherfucking chainsaw, you're like, see? You know what I mean? And so I think that conversation changed a little bit, right? And when we talk about law enforcement and people are bringing up the police and things like that, I'll give you an example. And people get caught on the language of it, but I can tell you a very succinct situation that I've dealt with. And this is why, like, me as an artist, a hip hop artist, everything is seen through that lens of being a young black hip hop artist, regardless if I'm a journalist, regardless if I'm in rooms with politicians or trying to run for city council, which is a whole nother story and entire. I'll give you an example. I had to DJ 2 separate events that were probably like a week or 2 away from each other. So one of the events that I did this event that was done by the Richland County Sheriff's Department, where they were trying to like raise money for this thing. But what they were doing was the cops were bringing the police dogs out to do like demonstrations and shit for the kids, right? So you got these German Shepherds, and the shit was kind of scary. They speaking in German, like "Dang, it's dang," you know.
That's a bit, you know, PTSD.
Where have I heard that before?
Right? Stop it. So, anyways. So the dogs are really cute. The kids are posing with the dogs. You know, you got the sheriff coming talking like, "Hey, thank you everybody for coming on out." Blah blah blah. It was a sweet event. It was very very nice. A week or so later, I had to do. I got to read something to you in a second that I just got sent. But a week or so later, I had to do an event that was at the what was it? It was like a Latin festival thing that they were having off of Decker. It was like a little pull up thing that they had. So you had like vendors outside and stuff like that. So the police department was out there again, the same jurisdiction, same police department. We're out at this event again. They had this vehicle called the Peacemaker. And what the Peacemaker was, it was reused, militarized tank, pretty much. You basically had this huge you had this huge fucking tank painted black, and they painted, you know, Peacemaker on it and put, you know, the logo of the law enforcement thing there, right? And the fun activities that they had, for the black and brown kids, they didn't have the dogs doing tricks. They had little things out there to say, "Hey, get your thumbprints done." Like, I'm not,
my lord,
fuck that,
I'm
sense of humor. Anybody?
I can't make this up. And so when we talk about the big fucking tank, I remember like when we had the flag issue in 2015, the flag was taken down and we had the Klan rally. I'm looking at the cops at this thing and I'm like, yo, why does it look like these motherfuckers are in not in tactical police gear, but looking like they're about to be like, you know, they're soldiers going into war-torn countries. And that's what it is. So when we talk about defund the police, what happens is you have law enforcement agencies or law enforcement like locally here and little small police departments around the country that will basically buy surplus military items for their local police force. There should be no reason.
That's where that stuff came from last year. I mean, the year.
But to get even weirder in that, it's not even that they're actually purchasing it. They're getting these governmental grants and money from taxpayers to only buy those things back from the military because they overproduced and couldn't sell them to anybody else outside of the U.S. or other countries. So they have to sell it back to us.
Well, the thing is,
the military industrial complex.
Yeah. But the thing is, too, is that, you know, you have a politician say we're tough on crime, and you show like the 1980s where you have like tanks going into, look, there's a Geraldo Rivera video where you basically got in the 80s during the crack epidemic. Yeah. He's like, we're about to smash this person's house with this tank. And this nigga's excited. Like he's jumping over a fence for them to tear down houses. So when you look at those militarized things, you have a certain position of the population here that it's just like, oh, we love it. It shows that you're tough on crime and this and this and that. And when you think about that, they're not pulling up in Wildwood with that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like when they think about that, they're not thinking about law enforcement coming into their areas like that. They're like, oh, go to them. You know, so when we say things like defund the police, we're saying that, yo, man, instead of spending like these millions of dollars on buying fucking tanks, could y'all like spend more money on training, or could y'all spend money where you could hire, you know, counselors, mental health experts, that if you get a phone call, you know, I have an autistic sister. And so I think about mental health differently, where there was a story that happened in South Carolina too, that I wrote about in that article recently at Charleston again, where there was a man that was special needs man that was suffocated and killed while in custody in jail.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That was ridiculous.
Because if he's special needs, you don't need to have, you know, the the squad coming in with batons and putting somebody in their headlock. Why don't you spend some of that money to hire professionals to come say, hey, maybe we need to have a different approach? Because the thing too is you hear cops say, we're communicators and we're therapists and we're this and we're that. No, you're not.
There's no possible way you could be all of that.
No, that's it. And while we're on it, side note, something else that irritates me. It's the same thing with motherfuckers on Instagram talking about their life coaches. Look, dog. Look. Listen. I understand positivity, but it can be toxic positivity, and sometimes it drives me fucking crazy. But I say that to say this. And I'll bring this up because I was speaking to a therapist friend of mine, where she said the problem with that is that there's a difference between life coaching and needing therapy. So if a life coach is like, all right, well, let's look at the stuff that you got going on with your life and let's figure out next steps. Now, if that person is saying, I can't get out of bed in the morning, I don't want to move, then you can't just say, well, you got to keep going. You know what I'm saying? No. You got to be motivated, because it's a whole different conversation.
Right. So
you think you're giving good advice, but it's misguided advice. And that's what I'm saying about what happens with a lot of these cops thinking that they're doing certain stuff that shouldn't be on their purview. It shouldn't be on your plate because you're not a therapist. You know what I'm saying? So I would say spend some of that money towards that. Like, there's a lot of people looking for work. There's a lot of people.
I'm going to interject and say this too. And this is another one of the issues where you're spending the money and whatnot. A lot of it is due to the fact we have such a large military force. And we train people to go out and to fight wars. And what we have been doing, we've been getting very good. And this is just insight just from reading military magazines and et cetera, going on to the other side, as they would say, and researching. But they spent so much money on that stuff, and they found ways to fight wars with technology. So you need less boots on ground, but they prepared hundreds of thousands of troops. So these people come back and they don't have jobs and they don't have certain skills that you can put directly into normal places of business. The easiest place to put these soldiers coming back from war is into police departments, law enforcement. They're coming back with PTSD. They haven't had proper counseling themselves. They don't know how to engage civilians who aren't in a war, in a nation that's in a war situation. Right. And they don't give them time either. I'm talking 3 months from coming back from being deployed, going through a quick police academy training to popping out in the streets. And it's not community policing either, which is where I think they should spend the money. They don't spend it on people and programs in the community so that they can then go and police themselves. Now, they take somebody that came from Hoboken, Wisconsin, and they put them in North Charleston, South Carolina, right off Spurl. They don't know these people. They don't know why they talking like that. They don't know why everybody got dreads and gold teeth. They're afraid. And so they're put in these positions and told to react. They're creating a kettle. Like, you're creating a bad situation by doing that.
But I read an article that said in 2030, most of the soldiers are going to be robots.
That's my point. That's what I'm saying. So what are you going to do with all these people that you've been preparing for the war on terrorism? We've been creating soldiers, producing people, send them, etc. They still have to live and eat. So that's another one of those weird things, but that goes along with that military industrial complex. They're trying to repurpose bodies, and it's a weird situation. So we're having to deal with that back here at home.
I mean, I think that the other thing about when we look at America has a reputation worldwide of just being bullies. Like, so the idea of negotiating our ways into peace, that's never an American way. And you see that kind of trickles down, right? So essentially, when we look at the civil rights movement, if we look at like a lot of these other things that happen within the country, there's never a time where, when we talk about government, it's like all the trickle down effects. It's not just the police that enforce the laws, people that make the laws, the politicians that might argue about them and whatever. Nobody ever said there's a problem with this country. Let's hear them out. Like, that's, you know what I mean? And that's with everything. It's like we look at, I think it's 100-year anniversary that women had the right to vote in this country. You know what I'm saying?
White women.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, let's be highly specific about that. And so when we look at those things, like, the progress that America tries to brag about, they came in kicking and screaming. You know what I mean? And so it was never a thing where America did it based on a moralistic thing. Like, you know what? We were pretty fucking wrong about this, And so what we see is, we see so many things happening now. People think that, oh, there's much more of this stuff happening. Like, no, we're able to document it more. You know what I'm saying? So it's like black folks been talking about police harassment and brutality for years, but niggas got phones. So it's like, you know, we can film this stuff now. And so now I think that there's I think some good and some bad. I think that there's more dialogue that's happening with it. There's more black and brown people running for public office. There's more people that I think that are getting to these situations where they see there's problems. There's a lot of people that got involved in politics that never would have thought they would have gotten in it. And they're like, well, look, who else is going to do this? And I'm encouraged by that. You know,
I am too.
One of the columns that I wrote was talking about the black and brown people running for mayor and running for city council. And I think it's a great thing because I think a lot of times, you know, we be in these situations where we have people governing what happens in our city, what happens in our states, what happens in our country, and nobody look like you in the room. Mm-hmm. So that's a big deal. And you know, we're not going to solve the world's issues within a podcast. Matter of fact, they're going to shut your shit down.
Right.
So this episode ain't going to play when you go to Apple Podcast next week.
On none of the platforms. They're gonna be like,
oh Lord.
All right. So
the internet. We'll just start another one.
Say it again. All right, Tamaya.
The cornerstone of journalism is supposedly to be unbiased and objective. But over the past few years, as we've seen national media completely abandon the ideas of being unbiased. I've heard more people saying the idea of being unbiased was always a delusion. And the deputy of the journalist is to do the work, get the facts, and also look at all the sides, but call bullshit when you see it. Basically, that we don't be polite about saying what needs to be said, and we don't have to give the other side the equal voice if the other side is spitting bullshit. How do you feel about that? And how do you balance reporting the facts while also clearly trying to show people your side if they see it, if they ever get to see your side?
There's a few different conversations with that has to be broken down. Number one, I'm a columnist. Specific, my job is to speak my opinion, right? So you know, there's different things, right? So anytime I write something, like when I wrote this column about Jamie Harrison and talking about, like, you know, all the racism of Lindsey Graham, the state, when they ran that article, it's like, this is the opinion of Chris Jacobs. Don't get at us about it. You know what I mean? So like, you know, so there's something that's effective with editorial / column work that's designed in that way. And that is a lane that I feel that I'm most effective in right now. When you look at other facets of journalism, I would say anybody that supports real journalism, take your money and support the places that do great things. You know, I know the Free Times / Postal Courier has a paywall. Pay for that if you can pay for it. You know, when Trump got elected, I wrote a column about the first 3 things that I was going to do. And one of those 3 things, I'll tell you the 3 things I said I was going to do. I said I was going to subscribe to all the publications that I support. So New York Times, Washington Post, Atlantic, the state newspaper, Free Times. I'm paying for that because you have to protect journalism. The second thing, I was like, nigga, I'm getting a pistol and a CWP, right? You know, and the third thing was to support like your local chapter of the NAACP, become a member, that type of thing, and try to be involved in the community. And so when we're talking about journalism, you know, hardcore journalism, where you're talking about investigators and reporters and things like that, that's a sanctity that needs to be protected. But that's not what people are talking about when we're talking about news and misinformation, things like that. Here's what you have that happen. Let me break this down. And I think it's really, really interesting. Is that, and I break it down from a record store position, and I'll filter it back to journalism. I used to work at Sounds Familiar before I worked at Papa Jazz. Sounds Familiar now is the name of my record label. I used to work at Sounds Familiar like maybe 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we used to be up the street from a Best Buy. So here's how CDs used to work back in the day. Let's say Kanye's Graduation comes out and we have to buy the CDs from the record label. And so we're like, all right, the record label says we'll sell you these Kanye CDs for $9 a piece. Like, all right, cool, $9.99 a piece on the record label. So our sale price is $12.99. And when it's not on sale, it's $14.99. That's your standard markup that you would have in the business, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Best Buy up the street, they're buying the CDs at the same price as we're buying them from the record labels. They buy them for $9.99, but they'll sell it for $7.99. They'll literally lose $2 on that shit. Mm-hmm. And they do that because people say, exactly, oh, I'm going to come in here for the cheap CDs. I'll stay and buy a wash machine. So they're operating under a loss leader. And a loss leader basically meaning we're going to lose money on this shit because we know it helps the greater good of the company. Here's how that applies to journalism. When you look at the CBS's, NBC's, and ABC's, your news division operated under loss leader, which basically meant, hey guys, the journalist department and the news department, y'all don't fuck with us. Leave us alone. Let us do our fucking work. And we'll give you the news. And that was effective because you basically had reporters and a system of people that was just basically like, yo, we don't have to worry about turning a profit, so we can do our job. And the networks understood that it was an importance to it. Now what ended up happening was
enter Rupert Murdoch.
I wouldn't even go there. I would go Ted Turner. I mean, because all of them did it. Because the
24-hour news cycle.
Exactly. When you have a 24-hour news cycle, all of a sudden, if you got a network that's going 24 hours with news, then all of a sudden the conversation changes into profit margins. Then the conversation turns into advertising. Then the conversation turns into how is this show going to make money and have viewership? Nobody ever gave a fuck about viewership. You know what I'm saying? On CBS News in the 1960s.
Never.
You know what I'm saying?
Never.
You know, that conversation, this didn't exist. And so when you're looking at what happened with news and journalism, or maybe you just say, you know, television journalism, what you ended up happening was as soon as somebody had a 24-hour news market, then it just started all popping up. So Fox News is basically like, well, we're going to have our version. And MSNBC, we're going to have our version. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. And so what ends up happening is you're basically going to go to the people that side with your sensibilities, right? Like you're basically going to be like, all right, I'm going to listen to Richard Maddow versus, you know, Tucker. I can't stand that motherfucker Carlson. You know what I mean? So like people will find the places that echo the things that they're looking for. And a lot of times, you know, people try to be like, oh, I want to hear the other side, but it's none of it is real. So when you try to go to the Fox News side, you're not going to hear anything real. So what you're going to have to depend on, that I urge, is support those publications that have the money and the time for investigative reporting, because you know the New York Times and the Washington Post, those are like the real reporters, and we have the State has some great writers as well. Free Times has some real great writers as well that are basically beating the streets that have to tell these stories that are doing that real reporting that you're talking about. And so, you know, they all play their part, right? Because sometimes I'm a reporter, sometimes I'm a columnist, and sometimes one works more effective than the other, you know, and sometimes you have to put the work in. And a lot of times you can't have reporting if you don't have a publication with a budget that will let you do your work. So if you ever see that movie Spotlight, they would talk about like Spotlight was a movie that took place in Boston, and it was based on a true story of how, I think it was the Boston Globe, exposed this huge racket that was happening in the Boston and the Massachusetts area of priests molesting children. It was like over 200 of them. But one of the things they talked about in the movie was the Spotlight division. They were like, yo, it might take a year and a half for us to do this story. And you had the publication saying, all right, we got a division of 5 people. We're going to leave you the fuck alone, right? And let you do your job. And they won a Pulitzer. You know what I'm saying? So like, those are the things that's important too, is that we also have to give these publications the resources in order to do their job. So that's why I say, I know there's paywalls, a lot of these publications, but pay for it, because that helps. That helps as well. And so those are the things that you can kind of help combat that, is that when you see people doing great work, try to subscribe and you know, and find those people that challenge you. Find those people that not only say the things that you might agree with, where you're like, wow, this person is in my head and they're articulating this better than me. Find those people that have those opinions that are well thought out that you don't agree with, and work on work on your perspectives on a lot of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? But as far as like 24-hour news cycles, it's all mush. You know what I mean? Like there's some stuff that you might be like, I'm good, I can watch this. And some stuff is just like, I just got to stay away from it altogether. But actual real reporting, support the actual real reporters.
So it's like going to the bootlegger for your CD as opposed to going to Papa Jazz.
I mean, pretty much. I mean,
because like Tucker Carlson, those people that you talk, those media heads, they're taking other people's stories,
right,
and they're refiltering it again. to give you some kind of bias on the story. And like you said, and I understood this too, just adulting, as I always like to tell people, like, it's hard to adult, but when you realize why it's necessary to do so, you'll do it. I realize like now I don't have any bootleg stuff. I don't bootleg music. I don't bootleg anything that I watch. I don't bootleg any services from anybody. I'll pay for it. And I realize, like you said, there is that value in doing it because you support the actual foundation so that those people can take care and they can continue to bring you good content.
I feel you. Listen, I ain't paying for no damn Mayweather versus. No. I'm messing with you. But I tell you this though, from an artist perspective, you know, it was funny because that was kind of the question that we had like back before like music streaming back in the day, where we would talk about like bootlegs versus like the digital media. And we were talking about the reason why bootleggers kind of like really affected us is because those people were still buying the content as opposed to people that was just getting it for free, you know?
Yes.
But I always say this, like as an artist, as things kind of come full circle, I don't care about selling music digitally anymore. I'm basically like, you know, when I put music out digitally, I just expect y'all to have that for free. So my thing is like, all right, well, I'm going to do fly creative shit. Like, here's limited edition vinyl, buy the vinyl. Here's, you know, these dope Prince t-shirts I got, or this dope merch that I have out. Because when people support you and they rock with you, they're going to come back and help out. You know what I'm saying? But you have to train the public as much as possible, because like Columbia, you got to train the community how to support artists, right? Because what happens in Columbia specifically is that this is a town that focuses on, I call them like bar music, right? Where you got like the Wild Wings and you got like the Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever, those places that aren't music venues, but they're places that it's a bar that happens to have a stage on it.
There you go.
And one thing that happens in particular with those places is the band might get paid by the bar, but the public gets to see those shows for free. And it beats it into the public's heads like, oh, art and music is free out here. So
that's not how it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And so you have to train the public. So it'll be certain things where I'll do an event and I'll charge like a very, very low cover just to put it in their heads. Like, yo, you got to pay for this. You got to pay for this. You know what I mean? I remember there was one year, years ago, I was brought on a board for a music event, and they had a budget of like 6 figures to put this music event together. And they brought me on this board, and they were going to pay me to be on this thing to help out. And it was like, look, we want to see if you can help get local talent that will perform for exposure. And I tell them, I was like, guys, we have over $100,000 budget. There's no way I'm going to ask local artists, me being a local artist as well, to perform for free when you got the money for it. You know what I mean? Huh?
Show some respect.
That was my last conversation. But my thing was this. I said, look, you have to make a habit of paying these artists. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what you agreed to. I don't care what dollar amount you have on it, but you have to make it a habit to tell these artists that their time is worth being paid for. And then when you train the people, they get it. You know what I'm saying? So that's an uphill battle, but that's something that you gotta deal with too as well.
Well, since we're on the topic of music, let's go to the next question. So music has played a key role in social activism and various rights movements throughout history. Humans raise their voices to highlight injustice, inspire action, and achieve lasting change. How has the culture of activism changed over the generations? And do you think we are using our platforms properly to engage and promote change? In what ways do you use your platforms to educate and impact others?
It's interesting, man, because like I never want to be in a situation where I'm telling somebody how they should be involved with social issues. You know what I'm saying? It's like I can just speak like for myself where quote unquote activism and art never felt like they had to be separated, right? So like one of the things that happened when the Floyd murder happened last year and all the protests were happening nationwide, I started getting hit up by like a lot of these publications around here talking to me about the music that I was making and the stuff that I was doing. And they were like, oh, how can you use your music as an art form to talk about social injustice? And I was like, yo, I've been doing this shit.
Consistently,
Like my column for the Free Times is called Fight the Power.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? and so, but to me, that was never something that I felt like had to be separated because I grew up in a culture where all the people I look up to are the people that spoke out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the Alis of the world, or even like the music, the hip hop I grew up on. The Public Enemies talked about those things, and you know, exactly. So to me, I come from a culture where none of that stuff was separated. You know what I mean? So to me, I don't see it as protesting. I just see it as, hey, you have a responsibility, right? So there's a Chris Rock joke where he basically said, to white people, Tom Hanks is a great actor, but Denzel is a god to his people. And there's something that happens where when you put in these situations, whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer, whether you're an actor, where some people feel that social responsibility, like, yo, I can't just do this shit and be successful and not speak out against this stuff. And then you got other people that's just like, yo, I'm gonna make my money and fuck all that shit. And I can't yell at them dudes because, like, you know, do you? You know what I mean? Like I used to get mad about that stuff. You know, that conversation about Jordan, you know, Republicans buy shoes too and all that type of stuff. It's like, you know, I mean, really, like I had a long drawn out conversation about that. I wrote about it. And I'm like, you know, instead of me getting angry about what Jordan didn't do socially or politically, why don't I champion the people that are speaking out against that stuff? Right. Because
talked about that in the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, because
LeBron using his platform.
Absolutely. And that's where I feel like people got to give Bron his props compared to Jordan, because LeBron never thought about how would me speaking out against this shit will hurt my bottom line. You know, LeBron has never done that. Right. But you also got to look at the opposite side of that, right? Where it's that responsibility is something that happens specifically with black athletes, where Larry Bird came from French Lick, Indiana, and French Lick, Indiana has an opioid crisis going on.
That's what I'm saying.
Nobody's like, oh, where's Larry talking about the pills going on in French Lick? You know what I'm saying?
No.
You know, nobody expects that of the white athletes. And it's one of those things where it's kind of funny because it's basically like, you know, when we talk about the Colin Kaepernick shit, we keep talking about the black football players to say something. I'm like, yo, where the fuck is Tom Brady? If Tom Brady said, yo, matter of fact, that nigga can do whatever he want at Tampa. If Tom Brady said, yo, make Kaepernick my backup.
Oh, it's done.
Who's gonna argue with him?
No arguing. And that's my favorite one. That's my favorite football player too. That hurt my feelings. But you're right. Tom Brady, if he said it, it's gonna go. And I have to agree with you. There's a different level of accountability and responsibility. But it's more so it's like that little Spider-Man quote, you know, you have all that power and that responsibility. And for us being in the quote unquote, in the minority of power, whoever amongst us has a little bit of influence, we give them so much weight on their shoulders. Yeah. That's why I've been very, very kind to LeBron. I understand what he's doing. I understand how hard it is. Even with Jordan, part of the reason why he didn't do what he did, people don't realize is like the pressure that was under him. He was holding up the league by himself through the whole 90s. It was just him. He took his little time off. They did a little Olajuwon thing, but it mainly was Jordan all through the 90s. It's a lot of pressure.
I mean, and that's what I want to have some grace with it, right? Because again, when we argue about the people that aren't being out there, we take away from the people that are doing it. So I would rather highlight people that are doing it than to go to somebody, but you should say something. You know what I mean? Because so when I wrote about the Jordan thing, right? Here's how I made sense of it in my brain, right? If you got this scale, on the bottom end of the scale, as far as like black athletes, as far as like involvement in the community, on the bottom end of the scale, you got motherfucking OJ. Right?
That's true.
On the highest end of that scale of black athlete involvement, you got Ali. Jordan somewhere in the middle.
That's it.
And that's fine. And that's fine. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's fine. Like whatever. You know what I mean? So my thing is, as far as like being an artist and being socially active, that's just something that I want to do. I had to lighten up over the years too, because it's like, you know, when you go to the strip club, you don't want to hear the Roots. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
There's a time and place for everything.
So I had to lighten up on that stuff as well, where I'm basically like, you know, like, who gives a fuck about Ja Rule at a time like this? You know what I mean? Like, it had to be that. Like, you know, it's like, that shit is real. It's like 9/11. Why are we calling Ja Rule? And it's like, you know, I get it. And that's not a diss Ja Rule, but like, maybe it is. But like, yeah. But that's my thing. It's that there's moments where, you know, we be wanting these people to speak out, and as soon as they say something, like, no, don't say nothing again.
Pull it back. Exactly.
You know? So my whole thing is like, you know, if you want to say something, say it. You know, if you don't want to say it, we got this. Like, stand back. We got this. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel about it. It's like, it's something that I just feel that's just how I'm built. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that's just normal to me. Like, that's the music that I make. All the art and the music that I love the most over the years. It's not just entertaining, but it's also, there's a social awareness to it. Absolutely. You know?
But I want to build on that point that you just made. I have to agree with you, man, totally that I'd rather have people speak on things that actually care about it and have been informed than somebody just responding based off of emotion or because people told them that they have to.
Exactly.
Because then you get what you don't want from it, and it's not effective. And
what you got, white America on social media. Well, I think this.
That's the thing. You ready? And that's something hard, and that's something new because social media, got to deal with it. But I'd rather have something that is consistent and that's focused and that you can see as, hey, every time I go back and look, yeah, these people over here talking like that, that's their echo chamber. But when I come over here, it seems like stuff's curated. Like, they know what they're doing. Like, they're putting out this information on purpose and it's coming from the right way. Like, I don't want Moneybagg Yo talking to me about social conditions and how to correct them after I've been listening to his music, because it's going to be like hearing that crazy person yelling on social media about how they need to change this or that without any understanding what's going on. I'd rather just go to somebody who's been doing this doing this work so I can know, hey, what I'm getting is a good product.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I mean, and I think when people come to their conclusions, right, as far as who they want to be as artists, they just have to know that unless you go through that moment where you're saying, I want to speak out against these things, if you don't choose to do that, you can never be godlike status or goddess-like status. All the people that we admire that are on those higher levels, they use their platform to speak out against that stuff. Jordan is just an odd puppy where it's such a, he proves how rare he is because nobody else is going to be that big without saying anything. That's why, that's why, you know, and Black culture as a whole, we just love to see Black people do well, even if they don't deserve our love. Like, to all, I mean, seriously, like all years, think about this. The only other person that I think was Jordan-like in their field that never said shit was Tiger Woods. And Black people just embrace Tiger Woods. We love Tiger Woods. Don't know what the fuck a par 4 means, but we all excited. And we just, because we just embrace that. And there was nothing in the history of Tiger Woods, even now, that ever said that he gave a fuck about Black community as a whole or the struggles we deal with. He was like, look, man, I'm at the Masters. Donald Trump giving me an award. Let's go.
He like,
he's Cabo Coco Blasian.
Yeah, right.
But do you think it's selling your soul if you don't speak for your rights?
I can't do that because I can't say that, right?
You can't. It's hard to put that.
I just hope if I was ever given that situation, that power, I would just handle it differently, right? Because think about this. Tiger's like, nigga, I just want to play golf.
That's it.
He ain't know if all this other stuff was going to be involved with it, and so you know.
Just like Naomi Osaka, she just wanted to play tennis. She didn't want to. She didn't want to go and talk to these people afterwards about some bull.
Yeah. And so I get it with the Tiger thing. Now that might not mean that I'm gonna put him on my shoulders and salute him because he's proven he doesn't deserve a lot of the embracing that the Black community has done. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because same thing happened to OJ. Like, OJ made it a clear point that he ain't fuck with Black people for years. And all of a sudden, after he was acquitted, that motherfucker wearing dashikis and talking about, like, you my people. Like, no. You know? So like the Tiger thing is just, that's why it's just interesting and more.
It's a very good example, though. It's weird. It's a good example, though, because it further proves like that weird point where and this is why I try to give Black people the same freedoms everybody else has. if you're a white person and you're out here topping your field, whatever the field may be, you don't have to technically go out there and fight for quote unquote white people's rights. You don't have to. You can live your life. That's part of the privilege. You can live your life. You can enjoy yourself, make your money, and you will not be judged.
Yeah. And nobody's asking Aaron Rodgers to do anything.
No.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so that's kind of the burden that happens with, you know, anybody that's black that's in a public situation. And it doesn't even have to be something famous national level. It's like, you know, I know that it's being in Columbia is not huge, but I understand like, I'm one of the few, if not only black columnists in the city. I take that seriously. You know what I'm saying? So it's something that I take to heart when I want to write about something where it's just like, despite what people might feel about me, they might not like me personally. They might not can't stand me. They might think I'm too beige. They cannot call me They cannot call me a Tom. They cannot call me a Tom. And I stand on that shit. That's something that I depend on, where I'm like, yo, every aspect I've ever had where I can speak out anywhere. We doing this podcast. I'm talking about police brutality against black and brown people.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Every platform I've ever had, I've done that. And maybe if I didn't do it as much, I'd be further along. Who knows? But however I'm built, I'm always talking about that. So people say what the fuck they want about P. He's no Tom. I'm not doing that. You know.
So do you have that Huey P. Newton / Malcolm X syndrome? You know how they always say light skinned brothers got to go real hard.
Well, listen, I talked about this in my show, Black as Fuck. I call it beige brilliance. And so
I like that.
But there's a theory to it, right?
Yeah.
And I believe this. I feel like when you look at the Malcolms and Huey P's, the Farrakhans, or even in hip hop culture, you look at the Commons, who was all like self-righteous at some point. And he, I don't know, think it's time. But what happened was, I think what happens is, best way I can explain it. I used to write for this hip hop publication in South Africa called Hype Magazine. And one of the women that worked for the publication was a black woman. And we used to joke because she was a light-skinned complexion black woman and her last name was Jacob. So we joked like, you might be my long lost South African cousin or something. And she was telling me this. So we had this great conversation. She was telling me this. She said, you need to come out here. She said, they'll fucking love you. You're a hip hop artist. You're from South Carolina. You know, you're not from South Carolina, but you're from a hip hop artist. You're from America. So they don't know what the fuck South Carolina is. And she said, I mean, you know, they don't give a fuck. You're American. You're American. They don't give a fuck about what state you come from unless it's like, you know, New York. Other than that, they don't give a fuck. But she's basically like, they'll invite you in their homes. They'll love you. They'll feed you. She said, but they'll call you colored. And I'm like, what's colored? And she said, oh, I'm colored. She said, that's the terminology they give to light-skinned black people in South Africa that basically says, we see European blood in you. And she said this to me. She said it so casual. She didn't mean it as an insult. She says, you know, they'll have you in their homes. They'll feed you. You can chill here. She's like, but you're never family. Right? And she said it so matter-of-factly because she even puts herself in that category.
Yeah.
That she's basically like, oh, yeah, that's just how it is. And so I feel that light-skinned black folks, they feel that, right? Where you have the idea of passing, where the idea of being light-skinned is this advantage to get further along in the white world because, you know, there's a difference between Joe Louis and Jack Johnson. You know what I'm saying? And there's a historical aspect to that, too. I'll touch on that in a second. But it's like, you know, where in the other facets, the lighter you are, the more comfortable white people feel because they feel like, oh, I see myself in them. But when it comes to embracing your black roots, you might feel like your blackness is always being questioned. So maybe psychologically, you're like, all right, well, shit, let me read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I'm 8 years old and wear dashikis and talk out against this shit. Or, you know, the difference between Bob Marley and Peter Tosh.
Yes. You're right. That's
where Bob becomes this global icon because maybe it was a complexion thing. You know what I'm saying? So those are like real questions that happen. I'm not saying that Bob didn't speak up against those things, you know, but maybe he was in a position where he could have because he was embraced like that. So, you know, Jack Johnson is my favorite boxer of all time. And Jack Johnson is the first black heavyweight champion in 1910. And the terminology, the Great White Hope, came up because of Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson won the heavyweight championship. They wanted to take it away from this black dude. And Jack Johnson wasn't just black; he was black. Like he was. When I say that, I don't mean just
black.
I don't mean just complexion. There was the terminology. There was an article written that said that Jack Johnson had unforgivable blackness. Right?
Oh my Lord!
Right? Yeah. So that was the name of the documentary that came out about him. Unforgivable blackness. So imagine he's dark skinned. He got gold teeth. He fucking around with white women. He driving sports cars. They were like, yo, we have to get somebody to take this belt away from him. And so that's where the terminology, the Great White Hope, comes from, where the Boxing Commission tried to find any white person that beat him. And they ended up finding this 6'8" farmer. He wasn't even a boxer. They found a 6'8" farmer that weighed over 300 pounds to fight him. And there was a fight that happened in Havana, Cuba.
It's like 100 degrees outside.
Yes, he ain't gonna make it.
Crazy conditions.
There's a picture that you see where after the fight, there's a lot of stuff that ended up happening where Jack Johnson wanted to come back to the United States because they tried to like send him to prison and all this type of stuff. Look, they tried to send him to prison with this thing called the Mann Act. And the Mann Act was this law that basically said, because he had a white wife or a white girlfriend at the time, and they took a train from one state to the next. But it basically said, she couldn't be your girlfriend because she's white, so we're going to treat her as a prostitute. So you took a prostitute from state to state. That violates the Mann Act. Let's send him to federal prison. So he runs away. He goes overseas. He goes to Canada, whatever. And so his mom gets sick. He want to come back to the States. And they basically say, all right, you lose this fight. We'll drop the charges. So he loses this fight in Havana, Cuba. And after he loses the fight, the Boxing Federation says, all right, we're never going to have another black champion boxer ever again. So they cancel that. So you're going to have like the colored boxer division and all this type of stuff, whatever. So here lies Joe Louis 20, 30 years later, because it's like 1930s popping up. Joe Louis is the colored heavyweight champion and he's fucking everybody up. And so what they do is they stage a fight, not for him to get a title fight, but for him to fight the second person, number 2 on the list. And it ended up being Jimmy Braddock, the guy that won, that was the movie Cinderella Man was about. Joe Louis fucks this guy up, right? And so all of a sudden, the Boxing Federation is like, all right, the Boxing Commission is like, we'll let you fight for a heavyweight championship, but we got a set of rules for you. They were like, if you knock somebody down, if you knock a white man down, you can't smile, you can't cheer, you can't put your hands up, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't be photographed with white women without somebody present. They have all these fucking rules for Joe Louis. And he agreed to do it, and that's how Joe Louis became heavyweight champion. And so when you look at how he got in there, they basically was like, you can't be like Jack Johnson at all.
That's it.
And then when World War II happens, there becomes this thing where he's fighting this German boxer, and it's like, America versus Germany. And Joe believed that the country was behind him. But then after World War II, like we know on Coming to America, when they talk about that shit, Rocky Marciano, fuck Joe Louis up, whatever. Yeah. What happened was he's overseas helping with the war effort, doing exhibition boxing and blah, 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 blah. Like he's in the military helping the war effort. And they ended up saying that he owed a bunch of money in taxes, which was bullshit. They could have waived it off or figured this thing out. He couldn't work, you know? So what happened was he had to get in the boxing ring to pay his taxes off. He was too old. He was almost 40 years old.
Yeah.
74 years old.
Yeah.
He fought against a 26-year-old Rocky Marciano, and Rocky Marciano was just like, I don't want to hit him because he was just But I say that to say Joe Louis found out kind of in the long run that as much as he tried to adjust to appease the boxing commission and thinking that America was going to embrace them, that after the war, they had no use for him anymore. You know, and Joe Louis is one of the greatest boxers of all time, and I love him to death. I'm obsessed about that. But that's the Jack Johnson, Joe Louis theory. You know what I'm saying? And so they embraced Joe Louis more because he was light-skinned, beautiful dude, light-skinned dude. And he's like, oh, he's light-skinned. I can see myself in him. You know, Jack Johnson, they can't see that shit. So,
he had the nigga nose and the nigga lips and the nigga skin. Yeah, like he looked like he was from Charleston.
Yo, and he would like smile about it. He would knock people out and laugh about that shit. You know what I'm saying? So that was the biggest thing. It wasn't just his complexion. It's just that you can't beat these white boys up and be happy about it. You know what I mean? So that was insulting and arrogant.
Yeah. Imagine if you scored like a touchdown and then you started celebrating it. Like that would just destroy the sport.
They won.
Look, they did that. That's what they removed celebrations. And this was in the modern era. This is 7 years ago? 7 years ago?
Listen, this is why when white people tell me, you know, Tim Duncan is a great guy. Like, fuck you. You like Tim Duncan because he never said anything. Like, it's like Tim Duncan, I've never seen.
You don't know Tim Duncan personally.
Tim Duncan is droopy. He won a championship. He's like, I am so happy. Thank you. Yep. Like, I've never seen Tim Duncan cheer a day in my life. But, you know. Yeah.
Oh, man, that was good. I ain't gonna lie, though. That's right on the money. He has it.
Let's go into the lyricism. So as you know, lyricism is the art of someone expressing their emotions in an imaginative and eloquent way. When you look at today's mainstream hip hop artists, many believe that lyricism is gone. Most rappers believe they are great storytellers. But what about weaving the tale? Do you believe that lyricism is dead and gone? And what are your views on the way the new age generation present their music or come across? Do you feel like we grew up in a more authentic time period? And also, how important do you believe in affirmations and intentions in reference to what you believe and speak becomes reality?
There she go with it. I mean, you know, I'll be quick because I think I gotta go to work soon. But I never want to be that guy that is the old hip hop dude punching his chest saying like it was better back in the day. I mean, because think about it like this. This is the way you got to think about it. The era that we grew up in, right? When we grew up with the Wu-Tang shit. Imagine, I remember to this day the first time I heard Cream, and it blew my fucking mind. I had no clue who these guys were. I was a kid listening to it on a tape that my cousin sent me from New York. All right. I say that to say the way that we embrace Wu-Tang, could you imagine the previous generation, the generation, how they might have looked at Wu-Tang?
Oh, they thought that thing was crazy. It made no sense.
Yo, you feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because could you imagine Curtis Blow's like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could you imagine Kumo D just being like, you know, Chef Raekwon, his name ain't even Raekwon.
Like, exactly.
Yeah. So it's something that always happens, right? We just think our era is better because we just, you know, we're biased, you know? And so when I look at a lot of the stuff that's out now, if I don't like it or if I don't fuck with it, that's fine. I'm not supposed to. You know, that's the way I look at it. That's the way I look at it. Right?
It's not made for me.
Exactly. So my argument is different, right? Like I do something every Friday on my Facebook page where I'm like, yeah, what y'all hoes listening to? Friday playlist. Because what I wanted to do was I got sick of, and especially a lot of hip hop people that I know, we'll spend so much time complaining about shit we don't like that as soon as you ask people like, all right, well, big up what you are listening to, they don't know what to do.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like people are so caught just wanting to be negative that they don't know how to salute and support what they're fucking with. So I don't talk about nothing I don't fuck with. Right. Yep. And so the kid's going to be all right. I think they have great lyricists, great artists out there. But I also feel like, you know, hip hop is sort of like, you know, life expectancy is different. Right. Because it's like back in the day, you know, like Halle Berry, 50-something years old, finding a motherfucker, right? Back in the day, a woman turned 40, you're like, oh my gosh, she's on her way down. Like, no, nah, you give me a 40-year-old woman, like, we fucking, you know what I'm saying? So I say that the same way, I'm saying this jokingly, but I say that the same way with hip hop, where it's just like, back in the day, you couldn't see hip hoppers in their 30s rapping, in their 40s rapping. My favorite rappers in their 40s and their 50s. Yep. So there's a career for all of these people out here. Like Benny the Butcher got put on at 37. So it's like 36. So what I feel with hip hop culture is there's so much stuff out there. I think that's important that you can make the music that you want and don't have to feel like you have pressure from a label, because Griselda's made a career of never making a radio hit.
Yep.
You know what I mean? The conversation about music and how you consume it and how you make it is totally different, right? So I think the kids are all right. Like I was listening to the Lil Baby record and I was like, all right, these niggas is rapping. I get it. You know what I mean? You know, let me go back to my Pharoah Monch. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I embrace the things that I really like. I do my little DJ sets. I do something called Law Sessions that I've been doing at my house. And they're fun. I appreciate it.
Real dope.
I make mixes and I put like this fly shit in there because I just want to embrace just dope music. And my whole thing is like, I'm never going to discourage young black people from creating, because the more these young black kids are making music, the less they break it into my house, taking my shit. Look, so please,
Go make music.
Yo, go record. Please stay out of my house. Don't leave me alone. Right. And as far as like affirmations and stuff like that is concerned, I know I was being facetious a little bit earlier. I do believe in that, right? I do believe in putting your energy and positive reinforcement and direction. But I also feel that, I do the I Ching and all that type of stuff. I'm a hippie at heart with a lot of that stuff. But I do feel that it has to be a balance to it, right? Where I feel like there's this misguided thing that people make about their relationship with God, where they're basically like, you know what? If I pray for it, God got me. And I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. I feel like God is going to look at your work ethic, right? Mm-hmm. So if I say something that I want, you can be like, oh, well, I'm just going to wait till God give it to me. God will be like, all right, well, are you working towards this goal? Are you pushing to make this happen? Because there's a saying that goes, if you see a car broken down on the side of the street, people standing out by a broken down car, you're going to drive past it. But if you drive it on the side of the street and you see people pushing a car up a hill, you're going to get out and help.
Oh, that's dope.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's how I feel about affirmations. It's like, you got to put yourself in a position where people see that you're trying to do it, and then they're going to be motivated to help you. To just sit there and just think somebody's going to save you from this shit, that shit don't happen, bro. You know what I'm saying? So, and I believe that with the higher power too. Like God knows your heart, but God also looks at your work ethic. God's like, all right, are you working towards this? Are you really trying to figure this out? All right, well, let me sprinkle somebody in your life that's going to help out with this. Let me give you a little bit on that scratch off to help you buy that microphone or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of that stuff that I think it's a continuum. It has to work together with it. It's not just one thing. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to chime in with this. I will say this, especially when it comes to hip hop. You got to imagine the art form has only been around since 1978 in a commercial way, right? So very much still babies in the game. This is why we're going to be the first generation that really gets to see a lot of the people we watch grow up and become grown and have children and move on to elder age, etc. And that's a gift as well. Also, you got to remember too, and I tease about this all the time, technology has made it easier. Hip hop came from a place where basically they took all the music out of school. They didn't have no instruments or anything like that. They were forced to rely on certain ways to create music. Mm-hmm. They made it happen anyways. As we continue to move on through generations, instruments came back. Technology came back, access to studio time, etc. That stuff came back. So the music sound's going to change, the way people produce it. And it's also cheaper to produce music. So you have a larger influx of different ideas and creativity into the music cycle. Back in the day, they had a pretty lock grip on who they would allow through and who they wouldn't allow through. Nowadays, thanks to Soulja Boy, the internet rapper, he changed the game. I'm telling you, every young rapper out here right now always tease about it, but they do owe him some respect because he gave a different way for you to actually take care of yourself and get your music out there to the masses. But I don't fault them for what they do or what they produce. But my big thing is this, and it is working on what you were saying about affirmation. A mantra. If I have people walking around 24/7, my music and my mantra on my music is about hurting people and stealing their chains. Somebody's going to get their chain stolen and someone's going to get hurt shortly because I always tease, music is power. Music is like a spell. So it's almost as if you're creating an incantation to put out there on wax or CD or digital, whatever it is. And it's going to go out and it's going to make its rounds. Whoever it touches influence, it will. And whoever it passes by will pass by them. But I say that to say, enjoy what you want to enjoy. Make sure you're taking it in, but just do so with some kind of balance and a key eye for what it is.
Well, if that's the case, man, I've been rapping about I need to be rapping about having like a Ferrari and $1 million. That shit ain't happening yet.
Look, it's just like Joel Osteen with Joel Osteen, how he preaches. I always tease about this. That's why rappers back in the day used to say they just fake it until they make it. Literally, that's what they would do. They fake it until they had that car. But there's power behind that. But like I said, I can't hate on the young folks, man. I can't hate on them at all.
Absolutely.
KRS-One talks a lot about that.
Yes, he does.
He's an esoteric master now. He on that deep now.
Well, yeah, he talked about making Criminal Minded and Scott LaRock getting killed. You know what I'm saying?
Point. Yeah.
And so I get it. You know what I mean? So
that's what's cool about it. It's not dealing with just this generation. It goes back. It goes back. They were dealing with this back during when they were doing White Lines. Like they talking about doing cocaine, and everybody was doing cocaine, having fun at the parties. Like,
but also as a journalist perspective, it's like if I'm covering some terrible shit that's going on, that doesn't also mean that I'm endorsing it, right? I think
you're in creative mantra from it.
But I do feel like this as far as like the way that Neil Brennan had his joke about slavery, where he was basically like, what ends up happening when white America doesn't believe that we're in so much pain, like when we're talking about the Serena Williams stuff and stuff like that, is that when we talk about our pain, that shit be sounding jamming, right? So it's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, but he said this, but think about this. He says, that one of the ideas that slavery is really tough is that he's like, they had to make slave songs while working the fields. He's just like, do you know how bad your work gotta be that you gotta start singing songs to get through that shit? You know what I'm saying? And but he's like, but just imagine like the overseers is like, well, I guess they're cool, they're singing. You know what I mean?
The gift and curse, the gift and the curse.
Surviving. That's surviving.
Yeah. So there's that balance with that stuff too. And that's why it's just like, when Kendrick is singing all right, they're like, he said they're gonna be all right and they're dancing. He's like, nah.
That song because it balances that idea perfectly. But moving on, I know we don't want to hold you too long, and this is a great question dealing with that. Being a creative, of course, it can be a gift and a curse. The gift is usually you're able to have see unlimited possibilities in the mundane, and the curse is being able to find the time to create. Locally, you're well known for showcasing your talents, but not a lot is known about how you manage your time. And I know you're about to be busy, got to get ready to go, but maybe speaking of, that's my point. What are some ways you deal with time management, and how has it affected your creative pursuit?
I don't have any time management, and I mean that seriously.
Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being truthful.
This podcast, and you will understand. Like,
I mean, because all right, there's two schools of thoughts when being a creative, and I'm gonna tell you the one that I adopted. Like back in the day, I used to feel like, I'm gonna write every day. I'm gonna write music every day. I'm gonna try to record every day. Like that theory of like trying to work this and work this and work that. The other school of thought that I've learned is that, I say everything that I write or everything that I do is a love letter to the ancestors. So they got to talk to me. And so what I do now is I create when I'm inspired. And so when it hits me, I'm ready to do it. So like back in the day, like, when you listen to my podcast, I used to try to do it every week, every this, every that. Now I'm like, look, man, if I don't feel like fucking doing it, I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, but I do that in the sense of, art, I have to treat art in a way where I give it the proper respect that it deserves, as opposed to treating it like, all right, well, you got to put this out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all right, we got to do this, you got to do that.
Making some baloney.
But I can't approach it like that. Some people can, like, right? Some people can make a party record like it's nothing. They can produce like it's nothing, whatever. And they probably in a financial situation where they can do that consistently, or be in the environment where it can work like that. But, I got real nigga problems. You know what I'm saying? Like I got bills. My bad. I got bills.
Don't use that as my drop. Use that as my drop. I got real nigga problems.
I got bills. I got work. I have a family that I'm looking after. I have a father that just got done with treatment for prostate cancer that I was keeping on the low about it, but his treatment is done. So I'm going to talk about it soon. And so there's a lot of that stuff that happens. It's where at the end of the day, you don't want to create, but you're always a creative, right? Like you're always like, all right, when the right time's for this or that, I'm going to figure this out. You know what I mean? So that's how I look at it. So there's no managing of the time where it's like, hey, there's this discipline and I'm going to be focused on this. But at this point, my creativity don't work like that anymore. It's like, I know it when I know it. Like when it's time to bunker down and work on some shit, I know when it hits me. I know when it happens. And then when that happens, you don't see me for weeks. Right. So like,
explain it.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So my approach to it has been totally different. It's not something that I can have like militarized, set in time, that type of thing. And I feel like the work and the art is better because of that.
Yes.
Good. Well, wrapping up, I do want you to let our listeners know about some current projects you're working on. And also, if you could, of course, you got to do the social media roundup. If you could let our folks know where they can find you, where they can keep up to date on things that you're doing here in and around town.
The stuff that I'm working on, I'm finishing an album up. Hopefully it'll be done soon. But I'm working on, we're Tall Black Guy, supposed to be finishing mixing and mastering these last couple of tracks. I have a 45 that's out right now, a song called Baptized off my analog project. It's limited edition baby blue vinyl. And then I have a record produced by Tall Black Guy featuring Sky Zoo called The Black. The vinyl should be here next month. So please buy that. That's also going to be limited.
Yo, hold me a copy of that blue 45. I almost forgot. I got to go there and order my thing, man. All right. I got you.
I appreciate it, man. And you don't have to go to the website because the website charges shipping. So just cash at me. Just cash at me. And I'll just get it to you and save you a few bucks. But yeah, I have these, I have gear and merch on mobettasoul.com, MOBETTA soul.com. Buy a shirt, black owned business, all that good stuff. Or you can go to my website, preachjacobs.co, where I have my DJ stuff that I do on there. Loft sessions, I used to go to literally to a loft and throw these shows, but because of COVID, we couldn't go out anymore. So I just started filming me doing these little DJ sets on my crib. They're all free. They're all streamable. If you go to the website, you can see a video of the latest one, but you can also click on sessions and you can stream them from SoundCloud and even download them. My music videos are on there, all that other fly shit. If you want to donate to the cause, Cash App, $, Mo Better Soul, buy a brother a cup of coffee. Ain't got to be nothing crazy. You know what I'm talking about? I drink it. You know what I'm saying? I get something from Dunkin' for $3. You know what I'm saying? My medium iced coffee is $2.96. I have exact change.
I love
you know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Support your local artists.
Yeah, support your local artists, and that's it. Like, there's a lot of other stuff that I'm working on. Y'all see me DJing out here doing some stuff or performing really, really soon. But just keep up. Follow me on all my social media. It's Preach Jacobs on all my stuff. So Instagram and Twitter, the tweets and all that stuff. Yeah, just hit me up.
Excellent. Well, this is going to wrap up our episode today, a special Sunday episode of the Hilltop Glove podcast. We want everybody to go out, be better, be good, have a great week. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Yo, one last thing. I still got my pajamas on. I got to get ready to go to work in 5 minutes. So I really love y'all that y'all got your boy. You know what I'm saying? So, thank y'all so much. Peace.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.
That's it for today's episode of the Hilltop Glove podcast. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms. Also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Glove.